This is Joni Barrett with Out the Box Mind Body Studio, and we're going to be talking about how to do lunge today. So we do lunge in our Sun Salutation A in our yoga class, but to me lunge is a posture pose because lunge is basically walking or running or going upstairs. So it's the moving part of our posture. So we have lots of opportunities to practice a good walk or a good run in our yoga class. So we have Jan here to help show a good lunge, and so we are going to start actually in a modified lunge. A low lunge is how you'll see it called. So I'm going to have her come down onto all fours, and we're going to want the hips again, the legs stacked over the hips, so just like she has here, just as a nice setup. So just go ahead and walk the hands back to the knees for me and come up onto those knees, and we'll just go ahead and send the right leg forward first. So as soon as she sends the right leg forward, we've now made it into a split stance or basically a walk. So we'd like the leg to still be just a natural extension of that hip socket. So you don't want the leg outside of the hip, you want it right so it's still lined up. And ideally we'll have the same thing as we had with Tadasana, hip socket to knee, down to ankle, out to that second toe. So just a nice line there. Then we can start with the hands just on the hips. So let me grab the pelvis here so we can have a model. So we're wanting still a neutral pelvis. So a really good thing to remember whenever we're coming into lunge is that the pelvis stays neutral. It's the legs that are coming into flexion and extension. So the pelvis itself is not coming into much of an extension, especially not in a low lunge. We're really looking to be able to let the legs take that extension and flexion. And there is always in the human body more ability to come into flexion, the front leg, than there is to come into extension, the back leg. So the human body has more capacity for the flexion. So she's just going to do a real quick check by feeling those ASIS or those hip points that the pelvis feels level. So sometimes what you'll notice is the leg that is behind you, it feels like that half of the pelvis is back further. So what you can do is you can just bring the back hip forward a little bit and the front hip back a little bit, and that can help. The other thing you can do is think about the muscles between those hip points, those ASIS, and draw that together, that transverse abdominis or that feeling of saran wrap. So that will help to draw things together. And then that last thing you can do is think of squeezing the inner thighs towards each other, like you're going to bring the legs together this way. And all of that will help kind of just get that pelvis where it needs to be. And then just do a real quick check that our low back here doesn't feel tight or doesn't feel like there's a tremendous curve in the low back. And then the rib cage comes back slightly. Good. And the head is a natural extension. And then once we have that, the hands can stay, or the hands can come to the heart, or the hands can come up overhead. You notice when her hands come up overhead, she doesn't jut her rib cage forward. The rib cage stays there. So I'm going to show you that misalignment. So bring the hands back down, Jan. And this time I'm going to have you intentionally jut it forward, okay? The hands to heart, and then see how she pushes that forward? Now we have a tremendous arch in our low back. So we don't want that. That's not going to be good for posture or for yoga poses. So bring the hands back down. We'll realign. We'll bring that rib cage back a little bit. And then when the hands come up to heart and overhead, all of the movement comes from nice mobility of the shoulder and not by compressing through the low back. So that's low lunge. Go ahead and bring the hands back down, Jan. And I'm going to have her just step to the top of the mat, however she wants to get there. And we're going to go over high lunge, which is the other one that you're going to see in practice. And I'm actually going to have you turn around so we can get the other leg. So generally when we take this variation in our yoga practice, it's from the top of the mat. So we're coming from Tadasana. So we'll give her a really good Tadasana setup, and this will just be a nice refresher for everybody. So the feet are underneath the hip sockets. They're parallel. Remember, a real good easy trick is to bring the big toes all the way together. Make sure they're even, and then just give them a little bit of separation. Then we're going to make sure that our hips are level, so finding the ASIS, taking the middle finger, slide it down to the hip sockets, push the hips back slightly to give yourself that little bit of a hip hinge. Good. And then check that the rib cage is back, and check that the head is aligned. And then once we have those pieces, we can give a little bit of hug to the midline with the inner thighs, scrub away with the feet, draw the hip points towards each other, and all of that will give a little bit more stability to the pelvis. And then we're going to step back with our left leg. And then come on to the ball of the foot. So we have in yoga what's called a lunge foot. So Jan has a really nice lunge foot right here. And if you notice, she hasn't stepped back very far. So to come into lunge doesn't require a huge step back, or we could take it back further. So go ahead and show that variation. Good. And again, she's got a really nice lunge foot here. So go ahead and drop the heel down. We don't want this kind of foot in lunge because it overstretches the Achilles tendon all the way up, and a lot of times that causes a knee lock. So go ahead and come back into that really good lunge foot. Good. And then once she's here, she's going to square the pelvis. So again, the back leg is the one that has a tendency to draw back. So she'll draw it forward. She'll draw the front one back slightly. She can also think of drawing the abdominals together between the hip points, squeezing the inner thighs together. All of that will bring the pelvis into alignment. And then she's going to take her rib cage back slightly. The head's aligned. And then from there, hands to heart or hands up and overhead. And that is your lunge. So bring your hands back down. So now we'll show it with the rib cage push forward, because this is the misalignment that I see a lot. So hands to heart, and then intentionally push it. Yeah, so see how it increases, this big curve here. This is hard on low backs. And bring your hands back down, find the hips, and go ahead and re-square. Draw that rib cage back, and let the hands come back up from there. So now this time she's going to move exclusively from her shoulder blades. And hands back to the heart, and step to the top of the mat. And this is Joni Barrett with Out the Box Mind Body Studio, and that was your lunge pose.